Welcome to today's Explainer. Let me ask you something right off the bat. Do you ever get that uncanny feeling that someone or something is watching literally everything you do online? You know the drill. You search for a random product exactly one time, and suddenly it is following you everywhere you go across the internet. Well, today we're breaking down exactly how and why that happens.
Which brings us to the million-dollar question. Are you the consumer or are you the product? I really want you to think about that. Because if you want proof of what's happening behind the screen, just go check out the ad personalization page on your favorite social media platform. It is a wildly extensive list of everything these tech giants know about you. We're talking basic demographics all the way down to your deepest interest in how you think. It's all just packaged and ready to go. So how on earth did we get here?
Well, here's our roadmap for today's Explainer. First, you are the product. Then, the behavioral data factory. Next, we'll look at the Cambridge Analytica scandal, dive into the psychology of control, and finally ask, where do we go?
All right, let's jump straight into part one. You are the product, the shift to digital services.
Think back to the old economy. It was simple, right? You walked into a store, handed over your hard-earned cash, and walked out with a product. But with large tech corporations, we've shifted into this new economy of digital services. Now you get to use massive platforms like Facebook or Instagram for absolutely free. But there's always a catch. In exchange for that free access, the tech giants get to keep your data. You aren't buying the product anymore, you are the product. Actually, Harvard professor Shoshana Zuboff gave this system a name back in 2014. She called it surveillance capitalism. Basically, it's an economic system where your personal behavioral data is harvested, analyzed, and then commodified. It's kind of uncomfortable to think about, and honestly, most people prefer to just ignore it. But ignoring it doesn't stop the continuous increase in surveillance that's designed to feed the ever-growing demand for our data.
Moving right along to part two, the behavioral data factory, extracting the surplus.
Imagine this as a highly advanced manufacturing pipeline humming along in the background every single second. Step one, you use a free app. Step two, all your daily actions, every click, every pause, it's all tracked and extracted. Zuboff calls this collected info your proprietary behavioral surplus. And finally, step three, that surplus gets fed directly into incredibly advanced machine intelligence, entirely to predict your future behavior.
And it is honestly mind-blowing when you realize the sheer volume of data going through this factory. Since we're all constantly glued to our devices, the data pool is practically limitless. Your smartwatch and phone are quietly logging highly personal stuff, how many steps you walk, your average heart rate, especially right after seeing a targeted ad, and your exact GPS locations. But it gets even deeper. This data can point to sensitive life events, like a mental health crisis or a relationship change, like a divorce. This means highly sensitive information could be sold and used to target vulnerable people right when they're most susceptible.
I want to pause on this quote from Shoshana Zuboff, because it hits the nail right on the head. We used to think the internet gave us unprecedented access to knowledge, which it did. But under surveillance capitalism, the paradigm has completely flipped. Now, that digital knowledge has unprecedented access to us. It's basically a two-way mirror, and it is constantly watching us back.
Which brings us to part three, the Cambridge Analytica scandal. Data meets politics.
87 million. That is the staggering number of Facebook profiles harvested without consent during this controversy. A data scientist named Alexander Kogan built an app called This Is Your Digital Life, which asked users a series of questions to build a psychological profile. But the kicker? It didn't just harvest data from the people who took the quiz. It pulled in data from their entire friend networks, rocketing that number up to 87 million.
This unauthorized data grab was brought to light by whistleblower Christopher Wiley. He exposed that a British consulting firm, Cambridge Analytica, used this massive trove of private data to build psychological profiles and target individuals with highly specific political ads. As you might remember, this sparked an absolute public outrage over how voter influence was being engineered behind closed doors, and it eventually led to high-profile congressional hearings.
Let's look at those hearings, specifically the testimony of Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg. When asked point-blank how a business model sustains itself without users paying for it, his defense was incredibly straightforward. He said, "We run ads." He explained that Facebook's mission is to connect everyone around the world, and to do that affordably, they rely entirely on ad revenue.
During that same hearing, Zuckerberg was also asked about a very popular public concern. You know, that conspiracy theory that these platforms actively listen through our phone microphones to serve us ads? Well, under oath, he clarified that they absolutely do not do that. He stated that the only time audio is collected is when a user is actively recording a video on their device, which obviously includes audio, just to make the video service function correctly.
To wrap up the testimony segment, Zuckerberg was questioned about potential political bias inside the company. He confirmed, under oath, that Facebook employs between 15,000 and 20,000 people for security and content review. He stated clearly that they do not generally ask people about their political orientation during hiring, and that hiring or firing decisions are never made based on political positions or candidate support.
Okay, let's pull back the curtain even further in Part 4. The Psychology of Control, B.F. Skinner's Legacy. To really grasp what's happening beneath the surface here, we need to look at radical behaviorism. This was a concept pioneered in the 1970s by a highly influential psychologist named B.F. Skinner. Skinner believed that human behavior could be conditioned pretty much in the same way you'd train an animal. The idea was that by controlling environmental factors and incentives, you could effectively modify how humans behave. And here's a wild fact: Shoshana Zuboff actually met Skinner when she was a student in Harvard's psychology department.
But there's a huge philosophical clash between these two. See, Skinner originally hoped his theories would create a technological utopia. He pictured a society of conscious control where people were conditioned to be totally altruistic and community-oriented. But Zuboff argues that surveillance capitalism has flipped that into a dystopian reality. Instead of a utopia, tech companies are using behaviorism algorithms purely for profit, limiting our choices and trapping us in carefully structured echo chambers.
Just let this quote from Skinner sink in for a second. He pointed out that it's easy to spot when we're being controlled by punishment or by a tyrant because we naturally want to rebel against it. But the far more insidious danger is the kind of control that operates through our own volition. We are so vulnerable when we're manipulated into wanting to do what the controller wants us to do. When you're happily clicking through an app that's tailored perfectly to your every desire, you don't even recognize that you're being directed.
Finally, Part 5. Where do we go finding solutions?
As the sources point out, even the biggest optimists struggle to see a future completely free of surveillance capitalism. Let's be real, society loves the free luxuries these services provide, so totally turning back the clock is pretty unlikely. But there are a few paths forward suggested here. These include serious government regulations on tech giants, creating a transparent market where you could choose to willingly sell your own personal info instead of having it secretly extracted, or just pushing for increased individual mindfulness and control over our own daily tech use.
Which brings us to the end of today's explainer, and I want to leave you with this final thought. Next time you look at your phone, weigh the incredible convenience it brings against that invisible data factory humming away in the background. Because in an economy built entirely on your behavior, your habits, and your clicks, are you truly the one in control? Thanks for joining me today. Keep asking the hard questions, keep an eye on your digital footprint, and I'll catch you next time.